All right. Welcome, everyone. And thank you for joining us today for our third segment of Ask the Dev Live. I'm your host, Dom Davies, our Senior Manager of Business Development here at AppLovin. In today's episode, we're featuring our friends and partners from Fanatee. While we wait for more guests to arrive, I'm going to take a second to give an overview of how this all works. We're going to start with some brief introductions and move into the good stuff, which is an informative conversation between our speakers, followed by some live Q&A. Be sure to stick around to the end. We've got a special surprise in store today. If you have any questions to the speakers today, you can submit them in the Q&A box at any time during the chat. We'll be compiling all the questions and answering them at the end of today's talk. I see a few more people trickling in. Can you give that another minute or so? All right, looks like we got a good group, so we'll go ahead and get things started. So as I mentioned before, I'm Dom at AppLovin, and I'm the host of today's Ask the Dev Live featuring Fanatee. For those of you not familiar with AppLovin, we fuel the growth of the world's most popular mobile games and help get them into the hands of people all around the world. Today we'll be talking about the evolution of mobile monetization over the years. We'll be sharing our insights into hot topic questions like, now that in-app bidding is here, what does the future hold for monetization in mobile? We'll also be digging into our predictions for the mobile gaming industry, while reflecting on the progression of in-app monetization and the automation we've seen so far. With that said, into some introductions. Our first speaker is Idil Canal, the general manager of Max by AppLovin. Idil joined the company when Max was acquired by AppLovin in late 2018. As the GM, Idil continues to work with all our publishers and demand partners to continue driving their businesses forward. Next, I'd like to introduce our guest speaker from Miami, Florida, Natan Finger, head of growth at Fanatee. As the head of growth, Natan runs all the core business functions, including both monetization and user acquisition. In his free time, he also acts as CFO. For those of you not familiar with Fanatee, they're the infamous studio behind Cody Cross and Stop, two of the largest word games on the market. Guys, we're thrilled to have you. Thank you for joining us today. With introductions made, I'm gonna turn off my camera and hand it over to you, Idil.
Awesome. Thank you, Dom. So excited to be here as always. Natan, thank you so much for joining us. Before we get started, and before you stop me from saying it, let me start with a quick confession here. Since the very first time the idea of Ask the Dev Live came up, I have to say that you have been one of those guests that I really wanted to have here. I know you're relatively new to the space, mobile and gaming, but in general, I think more folks in our industry should get to know you and hear your perspective. I think you have a very unique perspective and outlook on how things will be in mobile and how things should be when it comes to monetization and UA in general. I know you're very modest. I knew that you wouldn't let me say that throughout the conversation, so let me sneak that in there while I have the chance. Moving that all the way over here, I think the next thing that I want to kick off with is understanding a little bit more about Fanatee and your role there. So can you share a little bit about Fanatee, what Fanatee does as a business, and your specific role there?
Okay, thank you, Idil. I'm honored with your words. Thanks for having me. Thank you, Dom. It's my pleasure to share my views on this short life I have in gaming industry. So about Fanatee. Fanatee was founded in 2013. At the time, we were 4 founder partners headed by Rogério Silverberg. I would say that I know Rogério since we were in the kindergarten, so I would say that after I left school, he was always been a visionary in the internet industry in Brazil. So it's an honor to work with him as well after so many time. And after some different entrepreneurships from Rogério, he decided to move on and found Fanatee. Innovative DNA, always looking for a lot of care with the product. We love to be in industry related to education and word gaming. It's very, very nice for us to have that from our users and receive the feedback from the users about how we are doing. And I think that at the end of the day, what's good in Fanatee, one is the nicest place I've ever worked. I have passed through some different places in financial market. So I would say that it's very nice to be in this company. And also the perspectives that people gave us to be creating, be doing some things and testing some things that allow us to be with you today.
Awesome. And just a quick walk down the memory lane. When did you join Fanatee?
I would say that a year.
It's been a year? I thought it was even more than that. Okay.
Yeah, it's a year. It's March last year. It looks like a whole life.
Yeah, when I talk to you or when we talk about your waterfalls or networks and monetization, it feels like you've been in this business for at least 2-3 years. So I think this is going to be more apparent for those that are in this session as we ask more questions and get into the details of what you do on a day-to-day basis. So you kind of, you briefly mentioned this and referred to this, but I want to talk a little bit more about the background that you have as well. You were in finance before, right? Before joining Fanatee, what was your role? What were you doing?
I spent 15 years in financial markets, investment banking, macroeconomic analyst, institutional sales, and then 7 years as a portfolio manager of hedge funds.
Okay. So with that background, walking into a room and people asking you how to make more money, because you're going to be now responsible for the UA ads, and I heard that you're doing this part-time role of CFO as well in your free time. So with all that in mind, you're essentially responsible for the money coming in and money going out. Looking at the past 1 year that you had at Fanatee, walk us through how that experience has been at the very beginning. When they were talking about this idea of a waterfall, what was the first question you asked to understand? What was the first optimization that you did to draw parallels between finance and a waterfall setup?
Yeah, I feel sometimes I have a not romantic view of that, but now I understand better how it's really happening. But at the end of the day, I would say that user acquisition and monetization is just like a swap in financial markets. At the end of the day, it's an arbitrage where you buy users, you sell spots, and the difference is it's what you're making of money. And the only issue that we must have a game in the middle, and a very good game with good retention, with good features, and it's very hard to do any of that without it. But I would say that when Rogerio first talked to me about the monetization and Cesar explained me how it worked, I was kind of impressed that all coefficients equations, they say that they were kind of stable, robust models, and so on. When I got to reality, I saw that, okay, I think that the concept is much more developed than the tools that we do have today. So if I compare to the markets, financial markets, there's a long way in front of us to have the transparency and the agility that you do have when you talk to the big liquid markets.
Yeah. And going back to our very first conversation, I think when we first met back in Miami, talking about Fanatee and Max, there was some terminology that you used that was very interesting to me, because those are the things that I use when I look at waterfalls, talk to publishers, and kind of give them recommendations on what would be the next thing that will drive their business forward on the monetization UA side, right? The terms were spread, the volatility, the diversification, building up waterfalls, building down in certain ad formats. We always say that the real-time auctions in-app bidding is very similar to stock market, but there's also a huge gap between the reality of how the markets, the auction actually works, the financial markets, versus what in-app bidding really promises, right? It's a very simplified and basic, but also efficient way of thinking about markets. So you and I talked about this before, so I want to bring that conversation over here and have everyone hear that from you. When you're looking at the inefficiencies and efficiencies in between this transition to in-app bidding versus the financial markets that you've been a part of for a long time, what is the number one thing that you think will work really well with in-app bidding? And what are some things that you are concerned with in terms of the next steps of moving to a fully bidded waterfall or no waterfall, basically 100% bidded environments for each impression opportunity?
Well, that's a lot. So I would say that talking about bidding, when I first joined the company, I heard about bidding, but was not a reality. And then we started saying the first test was, I think that in June, July last year. Was kind of frustrating at the beginning at that time when we were advised to turn on only bidding without the line items in the waterfall. And the result was not good. For sure, not
that
good.
was Max, right? Just to be clear.
No, it was before. We always try to be on the edge in Fanatee of the technology. So we have good partnerships with the networks to be on betas and whatever they offer us to be there and to understand what's going on. So it was very, very, very quick. We understood that, okay, pure bidding is not ready. It doesn't work. And even the bidding with the waterfall, it's very good, but it's very dangerous on my view. Very good because of the efficient to manage it. It's just one line item and you have better fill rates, you increase impressions, but I like I usually say that the bidding smells blood because it learns. Traditional waterfalls, they are static, so things usually do not happen without you notice. But when you have bidding there, if you don't pressure the auction constantly, CPMs will come down because the algorithms will learn. So in one side, at one side, it's much more efficient to have the bidding. On the other hand, you must monitor more constantly. It's much more intense because it's 1-2 days. Suddenly your CPMs may come down because, okay, there's a specific line item from a specific network that's not performing well, and the auctions will just bring the price down. So I think that we have to create it over again. All monitors, all optimizations, every analysis you do is different now.
And asking you about why that's the case, and I have my own opinion and we can have a discussion about it, but do you think this, because you're speaking to the fact that it's more volatile right now that bidders are exposed to all impressions, right? So there could be a couple of reasons. And why do you think, or like if any or all of these are the reasons? One that I can think of is the fact that first price auctions, everyone is expected to put their best foot forward. And that's determined by obviously the lost price notifications that they receive, the win notifications at the price point. So bidders are learning. There are smart bidders in the market that want to pay the highest value for each impression based on their affordability, but also the market price. So that's one, the market price against what they're willing to pay. The second piece is, do we have enough buyers in an auction, right? Because we're transitioning into a place where the auctions of second price auctions, where everyone was bidding whatever they think was the value, and then the highest bidder who can afford the most would come in, and then they would just clear a cent above the market price, right? Now they actually need to know what they need to bid. They need to incorporate their margins into that and be able to think about how does that compete against others. So the lack of knowledge on the network side is a second reason. The third piece is the lack of diversification, the fact that we only have a few bidders at this stage. And for any first price auction to be meaningful and not drag each other down, we need very dense auctions. So I can think of it as lack of knowledge on the buy side, lack of diversification in terms of us not having enough bidders, and also the fact that first price auctions, the nature of it is that the market will determine the price and you don't want that. So all of that involved, from your perspective, what exactly is driving the volatility at this stage, in the hybrid stage that we live in these first price auctions with in-app bidding?
It's hard to choose one. I think that market's still not ready. Some networks are not ready. Diversification usually reduces volatility if you look for a risk return optimization. So I think that the more networks will join bidding, probably auctions will be more competitive and we have better results on that. On this point, probably I will mention that several times until the end of our talk, but transparency, transparency, transparency always. So it's very hard for me to have an auction where I do not see winners, losers, prices, line of bids, line of offers, who was competing for the user, was the Was the level of the bids? Was the deviation of the bids there? So every single information is important when you talk about first price. It's kind of difficult to me to talk about first price auction because it was the only one I knew before I joined gaming industry. It's first price auction. Okay, the more aggressive takes it. So the high one, the high one should always win. But for example, if I'm selling a spot, an impression for $100 CPM, and the second bid it's $20, it's not good. This brings volatility because if next time this guy will not be there, it's a huge way down there. And I think that the lack of enough players, it's a big part of the volatility. Other one, not every network is ready, but at this point, I would say that line items helps to decrease volatility in this hybrid environment because you can pressure the auction. So if this guy of $100 CPM is not there, I have someone at 90 and 80 and 70 and so on. So it will help. And if one day we go directly to a pure bidding, if you do not have this transparency, I truly believe that's not going to work. It's not going to work because it's very hard for the publishers to understand how to do that. And we'll probably be heading to a brand new world when we will be using the CPM cap price to value a user. That, okay, I will not sell this impression for this user for less than $80, for example. So it's a brand new world here that we'll have to reshape everything again.
Yeah, I agree. And I think we kind of talked about this before outside of this session, but talking about the future and just speculating on what the world will look like in a year or two, as is, I think there are a few key points that we agreed on. The fact that desktop and mobile, outside of the fact that there's no header, there is a huge difference in how you set up your monetization stack. I see a lot of consultants with desktop background coming into mobile and speaking to how in-app bidding should work and how waterfalls should be. And I think 90% of the time, these speculations are incorrect because mobile is a completely different place. And taking a little bit and talking about the past a little bit, just a few years ago, the way that the demand was diversified, the players in this space for mobile, specifically gaming, was very different. The advertisers and who they work with look completely different now. What that means is that each network that you work with at this stage, especially in the top 5, top 6 SDK networks, they do actually bring different value because there's specific advertisers that they work with and the others don't. So I think diversification piece is happening a lot more now that the technology is better and the auctions give them access to more impressions, more valuable impressions so that they can grow their business, go get more advertisers, publishers becoming advertisers. So a lot of things are changing, but going back to what you're saying, I completely agree that not just 1 year, but talking about in the next 2 years, there is a point where there's potentially a point that mediation might no longer be a commodity, right? If everything is bidded and if the publisher is at a point where they have access to user level data and they have their IAP users, ads users, and they co-mix, there is an opportunity for publishers like yourselves to be able to set floors on which users, which impression opportunities, and what type of ads they will see in an auction. That's a bit futuristic, but I think that's going to connect me. That's going to take me to my next question. In the next 2 years, there's a chance that mediation no longer becomes a commodity, and we start talking about the partners that you work with and what kind of value they add to your business, right? Is it a platform that helps you on UA side, that helps you with creatives, that helps you with your game design, gives you developer tools? It's going to be a lot of change in the space, I think, more than we have seen in the past 6 months. But I think it's going to be an exciting time for publishers, but your jobs will be a lot more difficult because it's getting a lot more technical now, right? You got every single top gaming publisher that I talk to is turning into a very a gaming oriented tech shop that has their own BI, that has their own tools. Taking the question back to you, I know obviously, I think Dom mentioned this, you handle UA ads and also the CFO role, and you see basically the full spectrum of the money coming in and money going out. Being able to handle UA and ads at once, what are some best practices? What are some benefits that you have seen by being the person who can make that decision, seeing both sides of the picture?
Yeah, I'm much newer on this UA side, so it's always important to mention that we have a very strong team on that to support me, either in monetization or in user acquisition. So I would say that if there's not good people behind us, with us, it's impossible to do both roles. So it's kind of a coordination here, more than a deep job of analysis by myself. But I would say that I see the value of joining the two different, join the dots here. Because sometimes you do run A/B test optimization at one side that could be instantly collected on the UA side. On the other hand, we see that, okay, you want to be more aggressive on specific campaign or strategy, that we must be ready on the other side to capture that. We are talking about ads. So there's a high value, but also making a point on what you referred about, mediation not being a commodity anymore, and having the products and the tools, and going back to financial market, I also believe that we will go to a more regulated market as well. It's happening, but I don't think that's happening the best way. But sometimes I think that we'll be talking about Chinese walls. So to understand, and on your side, the buyer and the seller not being together, and we being able to buy or sell in a very fair environment here. So I think that this is a way that this is a path that we will follow. It's very hard not to be there, and it's very important for us publishers, because sometimes, okay, I have a cross-selling platform, I have the product here, I have the product there. So, but the ultimate asset we do have is the information about our users. So we must protect them on both sides, on the user acquisition and the monetization. Monetization, we are starting to have a little bit more information about the users than we used to. Impression level APIs, user level APIs. So I like that every network will be there already, not all of them are there. And on the UA side, we do have some information, good information about the users to optimize campaigns, but at the same time, you see some regulation, okay, you cannot use the information to capture for this or for that or for that. And each state, each country you go, each continent you go, different regulations, so okay, I can use this. It's quite crazy to manage all of that. So it would be expensive, would be hard, and I think that will leave a lot of liabilities for every part in the business. So this is a good discussion as well.
Yeah, so that's a very large topic, but I actually want to add more onto that, because at this point in time, you guys are using bidding, and there are some networks that are not exposing user level data when they're on the bidding side, right? And the argument on the legal or privacy side is that data will not be exposed because the user level data that you think is attributed to your users, they see it as the user level data that is associated with their advertiser data, right? So step by step, I think there needs to be, especially by the big players, there needs to be some movement in the direction of what is considered the publisher data versus the advertiser data. But that's a lot more difficult in the current environment when we're talking about these US state level privacy changes, country level changes. Brazil is now coming up with their own GDPR. Obviously, each and every state within the US, we've seen it with California. So what are your views at a high level regarding what the privacy world will look like in the next 6 months to 1 year, and what that means for your business?
I would say that will be worse. For sure will be worse, will be more strict. I think that we are seeing an overshooting here. Every new market, we see that. So people becomes very strict, and then start to understand, okay, what really have to protect. And at the end of the day, markets, I don't think that's the best environment to say that, but the market used to say that there's always a price. So this information of the user, there's a price. And maybe you are not there yet. That, okay, who will pay for that? Not sure. Every player a part of that. And probably will have a legal entity to regulate this market, a specific one. Just like you have the SEC, you have central banks, probably this market, I truly believe that we will move towards a more regulated market, but will be also clear for the players how to deal with that. So, and this will lead to new products, new structures, and so on. But again, we are being very futuristic here.
Yeah, definitely. I mean,
in the short term, it will get worse for sure. We are working on that. So suddenly you have a legal team. You have to have full-time lawyers to understand, to analyze each contract. And so it's expensive. The market will be less competitive than it was for new players because of this kind of issue.
And taking it back to the diversification, like what exactly does that mean for your business at a very high level when you're thinking about, as an entrepreneur that runs, you guys are a small team as well, when you're thinking about the future of the company, the privacy laws, everything that's changing on the UA and ad monetization side, what are some things that you guys have considered or thought about when it comes to diversification? Because I know you have different definitions and you have different examples, but what were some examples that we could share here?
Yeah, we have a global mindset here. So we were born as a global company talking about the game. So Gold Cross and stop. The Gold Cross, we have it in more than 10 different languages. We've content locally for each country. So for Turkey, we do have a lot of people there generating content for us. So for Brazil, for Netherlands, for Russia, whatever you want. So we do have a lot of people all worldwide working on that. So we will invest what you have to do to keep global. So this is one thing. But at the end of the day, we are now based in the US. We are a Brazilian company, and our headquarters are in the United States. So we have to follow local legislation now. We are investing what you have to do to follow them. Networks, I think that sometimes they are not as quick as they should to help us on that. So I do see that legislation it's developing faster than the market. And I think that at some point we do have problems. And diversification, I would say that geos is one of them. So I think that's a very good diversification to be in different countries, different languages. But I would say that monetization is a specific portfolio where, okay, different networks respecting the maximum number of SDKs that will not be efficient for the app. And when you talk about enough line items, different geos, and so on. So I would say that it's like manage a portfolio here. UA, different campaigns, in-app ads, different geos, and different specifications for the users, different campaigns, broad campaign, install, whatever you use, it's all diversification. But at some point, I think that we'll have to be more efficient. So I will get the hook here to talk about also the programmatic part that I truly believe that will become key in the near future, because we are walking through a path to have customized waterfalls per country that we are the most important countries. And with bidding and line items, the hybrid waterfall, it's kind of impossible to manage that without the programmatic approach. So we are already working on some algorithms for that, and the same will happen in UA. So we have to be more efficient to be able to focus on what's important. And I think that the tools now are starting to become available for that.
Awesome. So one last question before we move into the Q&A piece, because I know a lot of people will have this question in their mind. For Fanatee, and from my perspective, having seen a lot of waterfalls, talked to a lot of publishers who have been in this business for a while, a lot of consultants in the space, I think your waterfall was fairly optimized. I think it was a job well done the way I see it. So tell us if you, and I know you guys run very rigorous A/B tests on Max. So if there were one or two best practices or key learnings that you had for the audience here that they would take away and go back and be able to apply, what are some things outside of using Max, I have to plug that in, that you would need to share with them? What are some things that they can also use?
We are talking about A/B testing or migration?
Not the migration, but the things that you guys tested in terms of new
Okay.
network geos, line item configurations. You guys just moved banners, right? And that's a whole new world, right?
Okay, so I'd say that being able to efficiently A/B test is just like a video game. You have even to be careful to not do it too much. So, it's interesting that it's never enough, and that's why programmatic is so important. And I'd say that also when you have enough data, you go when you're talking about the bidding part of that. We now managed to have line item fill rates here. So it's kind of interesting how you can deal with that, because usually you used to have only the global fill rate. And we used to optimize for the global fill rate because we're not having the information about the specific line item, how was answering requests and so on. So when you go to this level, I would say that best practices, okay, you have to keep focused. You have to be a long-term goal, not to get lost on small optimizations is the fourth thing, because if you start doing that, okay, there's 1% more here, 1% more, but no, it's not that. When you optimize, you are talking about sometimes 5 to 20% uplifts for a country that was already optimized sometimes. Maximum number of networks that you have to be the best practice of that. We have now internal discussion about, okay, what you want to load in the app. We were not discussing that because we're limited in the number of networks connected. So now integrated much more networks that we used to. And okay, what's the maximum size? What's the bandwidth consumption and so on. So I'll say that take care not to get addicted to it and lose the focus. And A/B test what's important, and focus on the networks, because you're making several tests that were not as good as we would like to on that. And I think that if you don't have a clear view on this issue, okay, it's not going to work. You'll not pay the cost.
All right. Dom, are you still on the line? If you are, I think
I'm still here. Hello. Guys, that was awesome. Thank you so much. We got a bunch of Q&A that came in while you guys were...
Dom, you are a natural.
I'm a natural. Really, you guys had the show. Okay, so we had a bunch of questions.
Please block everyone from Fanatee.
I don't see anyone.
Okay,
I'll have to look through it again.
they're hiding. I asked all of them to be here, and I think they're hiding because they're afraid of you.
Well, I am a nice guy.
So that's who Matt Smith is. Okay. So Natan, this one's for you. It was one of the very early questions, and it was operationally, what was the most challenging part about switching SSPs?
Operationally, I would say that there's no challenge if you have a good dev team. It's not a challenge. But again, when you talk about specific issue, I would say that depending on the language your apps are, and depending on the platform we are moving to, it can be much or less complicated. So I think that we were in the right language, and I think that the tools that we have now on Max is being much more easy to integrate and to move forward. So I would say that everything become easier on this part of the job now, but was not particularly challenging to move, and having support also important, very good support for the job. And at this point, I have to say that Idil is doing a wonderful job on supporting and answering quickly anything that any issue that we have. Your
top priority, Natan, you know that.
Don't say that. People think that we are protected here.
No, not at all. But yeah, I mean, I think going back to what you said, just to add on, Dom, one of the things that we cared about most is obviously you're starting a platform from scratch, and then we launched this in September, right? The amount of publishers, the amount of uptick in the revenue share that we have in the market is mainly going back to what Natan said. The amount of dev tools that we have, dev first tools that we have, just being very hands-on and consultative and not just focusing on the bidders. It's just the whole piece. How can we help them make more money? Because at the end of the day, and I keep saying this, but I truly believe in this, and we believe in that as a business. It's the idea that at this point, the growth will not come from our own initiatives. It will come from the growth of our publishers. As they grow, they'll have more money to spend on UA. They'll have, and that partnership will go hand in hand. So that 360 approach that we keep talking about, the reason why we work with so many publishers in Japan and France and specific verticals comes down to that, the partnership aspect. It's not just being an SSP. Now that we have a platform, we're trying to build more meaningful relationships, and there will be more tools and more features that we will be rolling out very soon. So more to come on that.
With that being said, and talking about the different tools and suite of products that we have to run the business in parallel, it's kind of an open question, but it was, what are the benefits of running UA and monetization in parallel? And do you see any negatives associated with separating the business in that manner?
I don't see the negatives. I think that even if you have different people running different areas, they should have a close contact. Benefits, we talked about some of them. Market is really dynamic here. So sometimes you can run internally aggregate actions, that's combined actions to have the quick benefits. If you take too long to answer, it's gone. Okay, you start a new campaign. Okay, you expect that your waterfall must be ready for that. At the same time, you optimize here. Your campaign must be ready for that. You know that you can increase your bid on one side because you increase your CPM on the other side. So it's, again, in the markets, I would say that swap. So if you go financial market, you look at the screen, you have the price of a swap, it's ready. It's not different trades here. It's only one. So I sometimes I do miss this kind of approach from the markets because there's a delay, some data it shouldn't have. So I think that there are a lot of tech to be developed here, but there's a clear benefit of having two sides very close each to other.
Okay. This next question, Idil, this is a bit more technical, and this is over to you. And it says, does in-app bidding require to be split into tiers? And by that, I think they're asking, does it make sense to run a different waterfall based off of your geo of the user? Like if you have a lot of volume in, say, Latin America and a lot of volume coming from, more tier 1 markets.
Let's divide it into two, because I think a part of it, we kind of talked about it with Natan, right? We called it futuristic, but I already know there are a lot of publishers doing that, the IAP ones, or at least IAP heavy ones. So bidding enables, now that we have user level data, and every other platform has it at this point, no matter what platform you're using, I think the recommendation is that make sure that you have access to data, make sure you understand what you can do with that data, right? As a publisher, now you're going into a state where you can understand your users better. You already have the app side data, the gaming analytics, their user behavior, but now you're connecting the dots between UA and ads. And that full understanding of what that value is for a user at the user level, at the impression level, is going to be a lot more important in the near future. So I would say start tapping into that now. I see a lot of people using these APIs, but only 1%, if at all, are actually using it in a way that's useful to their larger business, the IAP side, understanding their users and segmenting them and creating experiences that tailor to their spend levels, and running experiments against whether the user should be exposed to only rewarded video ads, whether the experience for this user should be no ads at all, or it should be updated every 2 weeks, right? There are a lot of things to experiment, and I think that's where the commentary about like publishers are turning into tech houses is a valid statement. And I think it's only going to get better because publishers, the developers that I work with, we all work with at the end of the day, all right, these are the top tier developers that understand their business. These are entrepreneurs and very smart individuals that have a tech background. And I think they will be able to tackle this new challenge in the new world as well. In terms of the short-term understanding of how do I build a waterfall in a world where I have a very well spread global traffic and it's not just tier one. When we work with publishers on Max, some of the things that we do is we onboard them with their existing stack as is. We ask them to make no changes, because at the end of the day, when you're moving to a platform where most of your revenue is transacted by in-app bidders, there will be changes. Each network will need to relearn. So you're shocking the system, so to speak. So we let them stabilize a bit. And then with A/B tests, we start looking into each geo. And the net, the key, I think, factor, like key note to mention here is that sometimes building a waterfall for a specific country or country group, 5% lift. When you look at the global, it's less than 1% of your revenue, right? And it goes back to what Natan said at the very beginning, I think. He said, focus on what matters. I'm not saying only focus on optimizing US, but try to understand what kind of lift in aggregate will drive what percentage of your revenue further. Optimizing banners, maybe building a full stack waterfall in your banners, you never thought about it, but many of the gaming publishers have 30% of their revenue transacted through banners. Post-COVID, now banner CPMs are increasing, so maybe it's time to reevaluate what you have done before and maybe able to lean into that. So there are a lot of things to be done. I think in short, I gave you the futuristic and short-term answer, but obviously there's a lot that can be done.
Great. Thank you. Natan, we have another question for you. And I'm going to add my own little spin into this as well. So the question is, what is Natan's ad stack? And I think what they're asking here is, do you use a combination of two mediation providers, or do you just run one? And then the other kind of part to that is, how do you go about vetting networks and deciding who to work with?
Okay, so first one, we had bad experiences with more than one mediation in the app. We do have games in other mediations. Again, we want to be in the industry, we want to know what's happening. So we are using Max, happy with that, but we are still using some other mediation. And it's only one per game. So never, and this it's other people experience. Again, I'm quite brand new in the industry, so they tried that already before. Regarding the networks, I would say that a couple of months ago, we created a committee to define integration and define the losers that will leave. So we define some specific metrics because it should not be subjective. So as we have limited room for SDKs in the game, we define maximum number of SDKs that we want to load. And then we see, okay, each one is having less than 3% of total revenue here. Okay, more than specific percent for specific country, because sometimes you want to take a network out, but it's very heavy for a country that's important and not as important for the total. So I think that it's all about metrics committee, and we do it on a monthly basis. And I would say that in the last several months, we are always including and taking out networks there, and always leaving the doors open, because we do answer to the people that, okay, we are just removing your SDK because this, and this. If there's any change, we are ready to test it again, to bring it again. If it performs, okay, great. And I also always make a joke with my team that in monetization, every sentence must have the word incrementality. So it's all about incrementality here. So if the SDK is incremental, good. If it's not incremental, just leave. It's not about replacing an old network. And I would say that sometimes you must check on some specific issues that I talked about that a lot with Idil. That's about caching. Okay, they both perform, but one has better technology. So probably this one will win. We will not leave two of them, because caching and memory management of that is still up. a huge issue in this environment here. A lot to improve on that.
Good thoughts, good insights, good feedback. Guys, thank you both. Today's session was great. Well, we're at our time limit, so we're going to move on to the surprise. So for our attendees, in a few moments, they're going to be receiving a poll to provide feedback on today's session. We're going to pick 2 people at random who participated in the poll and ship a pair of AirPods to their door. So be sure to answer candidly.
Can I participate here?
You can participate if you got the prompt.
I thought that I don't believe you sent it because I try every time, I never won.
You could ask Rogerio. He said hello from the crowd. Guys, I hope you had a great time today and found our talk to be valuable and insightful. If you enjoyed today's talk, visit applovin.com/events. There's going to be links to today's session, links to previous sessions, and you'll be able to sign up for our future events. Once again, thank you all for joining, and looking forward to seeing you all in our next session. Natan, Idil, thank you guys.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Bye.
So long, everyone.